This is my Sunbeam S8. It's a 1954 model. I've owned it for not quite a year, about 10 months. Bought it last July 2016. It's the first Sunbeam I've ever owned. I've owned a whole wealth of British bikes, and I've had all the BSAs, the Triumphs, Nortons and so on. Also a few little two-strokes. But I bought this because I was interested to experience the very radical design of this bike when it was launched in the late 40s. The initial incarnation was called the S7, which is very similar, same engine, transmission, everything, and frame, but slightly different cycle parts. In particular, one would note the big fat wheels that came with the S7, a very sort of American Harley inspired style perhaps. This bike is interesting technically for a number of reasons. Let's just have a little closer up look at the engine. Now we can see it's a parallel twin with one cylinder behind the other. That round thing on the front, that is the dynamo, provides the electricity. It's coil ignition, and this rather tear shaped chrome device on the side of the engine masks the carburettor. At the back of the engine you can see the distributor, and inside these boxes is the switchgear, the ammeter, and the other side houses the battery. You can see there the gear change, 4-speed gearbox, and the shaft drive to the rear wheel. There we have the shaft drive mechanism. You can see the styling of the bike. I find it very attractive. That silencer, very sort of, I don't know what you'd call it really, Art Nouveau maybe. And the whole lines of the bike please me. They're simple and uncluttered. Taking a look over at the rider's view, one can see the big steering damper in the middle and two little warning lights. One on the right is the ignition warning light. It comes on obviously if the bike's not charging or when the ignition's just switched on, and the one on the left is an oil pressure warning light. Here we have a choke and a dip switch, and over here a horn button. At the rear of the bike is what is known as plunger rear suspension. It doesn't do an awful lot. It does soak up the worst of the bumps, but it's pretty stiff. I've tried to improve it, but I think that's the way they were designed. At the front, and this is a rather over-chromed example of this bicycle, you can see the front forks, which are really BSA forks, with I think it's 7-inch front brake, which is not strong, so it's not a great stopper. It's okay with the back brake. I mean, as long as you drive accordingly, one can stop the bike, but it's not a great stopper, and some people with more engineering skills than I have adapted better and later front brakes for it. Here we have the near side of the bike. You can see the big clutch housing there at the rear of the engine, where there's a car type clutch with the gearbox behind it. Nestling down there by the gearbox is a little black tin toolbox with tools in it and the horn behind it. You get a good view of the frame from here. It's an excellent frame. It provides a good degree of stiffness, which makes the bike handle pretty well on decent roads. The suspension is not good enough to cope with rough and bumpy roads very well, but on good roads this frame provides very good handling in my view. And this bike is equipped with a dual seat. Some were, but most you will see had a sort of a pan saddle and maybe a rack or a pad on the mudguard, but this bike is equipped with a dual seat. I quite like it. It doesn't give perhaps such a comfortable ride as the pan saddle, but it just makes you feel more in contact with the road really. So I tried a pan saddle but found it too squishy. Getting closer to the engine, we can see that aluminium finned cover basically covers the sparking plugs, and down below it in the sort of crankcase is where you can get the dipstick out to check the oil level. One of the things that makes this bike so pleasant is that the engine is basically suspended on rubber. At the top there, I hope you might be able to see the front engine mounting, which is basically a piece of rubber there, and down below are things called snubbers, which again are rubber and stop the engine sort of moving about too much. There is also a similar rear mounting. This makes the bike a very smooth ride. Right, here I'm now going to talk about starting and riding the bike. This is my sort of default bike of choice really for going for just a ride on it. It's so sweet and easy to ride. If we get on it, it's a nice comfortable seating position. I can get both feet on the ground, the controls will come to hand. You see where my feet's placed and the body tilted slightly forward. I can ride this bike all day and be comfortable. It's got a light clutch. Gear change is quite nice, a little bit clunky, as we can often expect from a shaft drive motorcycle. Now I'm going to try and start it up, and this bike does vary. Sometimes it will just start first kick. It's cold, I haven't started it today, and I've turned the petrol on. I've learnt that it will often start first kick if you just turn the petrol on, close the choke, maybe get a little bit of fuel into the engine, turn the ignition on, and then see where we go. No, nothing. If that happens, then sometimes what I'll do is tiggle the engine a bit. It's usually a first kick starter from hot, but it can be temperamental when it's cold. So we'll open the choke and give it some air. From cold, it will soon settle down to a nice tick over. The bike for an old English bike is quite well muffled and reasonably quiet out on the road. I'll now go and turn it off. This is not a fast bike. I think really it's very comfortable at 60, 65. You do much over 65 and crankcase pressure tends to build up a bit, and it starts to just push oil out of any weak places a little bit. But generally speaking, it doesn't really leak oil much at all. You can ride, there's a little bit of oil splash that you can just about see on the silencer back there. I'm not sure where that's coming from. It may be coming out of the kickstart hole. Kickstart place, maybe escaping from the gearbox of it. It's not a fast bike, it's quite high revving. It's an over square engine, which is unusual. Overhead cam, but it's not a performance engine. It revs freely and enjoys revving, but it's people say that a good one might do 80, and I reckon that is just about it. This one will achieve 70 easily. I've not really tried to get the most out of it, but maybe it will do 75, maybe nearly 80 under good conditions. I think it's running pretty well as it was designed to run. So there we are. It's a pleasant bike to ride it all day. When I bought it, it had a few teething issues, as you'd expect. It hasn't been used for some time, but basically it's sound now, and I've done some pretty long runs on it. I live in Kent and I've done runs out to Whitney and Oxfordshire on it. A few weeks ago I took it from Andover down to Lynmouth in Devon and back, and yeah, you know, it's a good reliable motorcycle now, and I very much enjoy riding it. It's definitely a keeper. Yeah, you probably didn't really notice maybe, but it's very soft and easy to kick over. Low compression ratio, softly tuned bike. It's very easy to kick over. So although it can be a little bit temperamental when it's cold, it's not something that makes you break out into a sweat.